Hello, this is Hannah Scott-Joynt. Welcome to this week's Religion Media Centre podcast. Today, of course, like millions around the world, we're processing and reflecting on last night's news of the death of Her Majesty the Queen. And with me, as usual, journalists Rosie Dawson and Leo Devine. So, Rosie, Leo, your thoughts as we get together now?
Well, the first thing I did last night when I heard the news was to ring my mum. And check that she was okay, sort of physically, because she's in her 90s, but also whether she was all right about hearing the news. And I think, there's something about, a white-haired sweet old lady, that last picture of the Queen, that gets us thinking about our own mothers and grandmothers, whether they're with us or not. And something connects with us and it affects us in a different way than if she'd died as a much younger woman. The second thing I thought, that there is something unique in the way that we're talking about her faith. She's sort of commanding headlines in that respect that even no religious leader could, not even the Pope. And even though she's head of the established church, she communicated something about faith which was so much broader than Anglicanism or Christianity.
No, absolutely. That's what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. Leo?
Yeah, I think it was that sense of tremendous loss, not just the sadness of somebody passing away, but somebody who's been steadfast through all of our lives. I started, of course, as a local reporter, and I was remembering all of the royal visits I'd covered. And I think for many people, it wasn't just the big state occasions that they'd be thinking of. It's the time she came to my church, to my village, to my Gurdwara, to my mosque, to my church. It's those things, the time people felt they knew the Queen because she has been such a constant in all of our lives.
Well, I had an interesting evening in that the news came literally as I was pulling up outside my church for the licensing and installation of our new vicar. So we walked in and there was a lot of a flurry. How do we do this? What do we do? Should we do it at all? And the upshot was that we started by singing Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven, which apparently was one of Her Majesty's favourite hymns, instead of what we were going to do. We sung God Save the King at the end, which was quite a moment. And our new vicar must be one of the first to pledge the oath of allegiance to King Charles III. So it was a striking evening. It really, really was a striking evening. It's very good this morning to have Stephen Bates with us, Guardian journalist and the paper's royal and religion correspondent for many years, author of Royalty Inc., Britain's best-known brand, and Catherine Pepinster, religion journalist, editor, author of Defenders of the Faith, the British Monarchy, Religion and the Next Coronation, and one of our Religion Media Centre team. We're delighted to have you both with us. Rosie.
So, maybe, Stephen, I could ask you. So you were the Guardian royal correspondent between 2000 and 2012. And that was a period when the monarchy really needed rehabilitation, didn't it, after the death of Diana and all that went with that. How did you see the Queen's role in that, and how long did it take?
It took... depending on how you look at it, until Prince Charles's marriage to Camilla in 2005, the same weekend as just after the death of Pope John Paul II. In a way, the Queen was freed by the death of her mother at 102 and the death of her sister Margaret in a very short period of time, because there was a sense in which she'd been rather weighed down before that and felt more liberated. She certainly started talking more about her religious faith at that stage. So it was really a process. The depths of the monarchy's crisis were in the early to mid 1990s with the Annus Horribilis and the divorces of 3 of the 4 royal princes and princess. So things started to turn around as the death of Diana somewhat receded in the public mind. I think that helped, and I think the Queen's popularity was maintained because she was unchanging. She stayed much as she'd always been sort of calm and collected and dutiful, and people grew to appreciate that. I think especially as other parts of life, like politics, grew more scrambled and divided.
I mean, Catherine, it does seem that she became more explicit about her faith as the years went on. I mean, do you see that? And do you see that linked to events or how people become as they grow older? They're more reflective?
Well, I think it was partly a sense that people were missing the point about the millennium. If you remember, on New Year's Eve 1999, at the height of New Labour, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh spent the evening in the Millennium Dome with Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson, etc. And there are photographs of her with that very Hanoverian sort of grumpy look on her face, as if she was thinking, I'd really much rather be at Sandringham. But then on Christmas Day 2000, a year later, in her Christmas Day message that year, she talked about, well, we've all had fun, but to me, the real point of this anniversary, this millennium, is this, and then spoke about her own beliefs and how Christ's teachings provided her with the framework for her life, and she tried to follow them. Various people say different people influenced her on that. Some people say it was George Carey, then Archbishop of Canterbury, encouraged her to speak. Others say the Duke of Edinburgh was keen for her to do this, approved of it very much. What did happen was that she got a sizable post bag of people saying how much they loved what she had to say. And after that, she did speak much more explicitly about her own faith, and she did it on other occasions as well. When she was 90, the Bible Society, of which she was patron for many years, published a small book about her called The Servant Queen and the King She Serves, and she wrote a foreword to it. So presumably that indicates she approved of it. She doesn't write forwards to books very often, and in that foreword, she spoke about her beliefs, her dependence on other people's prayers, and said of God, "I have indeed seen His faithfulness." So, very, very firm belief, and she spoke in similar terms in her address, which was read out at the Lambeth Conference, the gathering of Anglican bishops this summer. So at different times she spoke about her faith, but looking back, it does seem to have been in the last 20 years of her life where she felt there was a particular reason to do it. And it seems that as she spoke more openly and became, in many ways, a much more religious figure, so the church of which she's supreme governor, the Church of England, saw its numbers decline. So she was a great advocate for Christianity. And in that sense, she seems to me a missionary. But I'm not convinced that what it led to were, more people in the pews.
I'm interested, Catherine, in terms of what her faith actually was. Is it true that she was very inspired by that Billy Graham tour when it came to Britain? In the 60s. I'm just interested in what was her faith really like? What kind of faith was it?
I think you've been watching The Crown, Leo.
I have been watching The Crown, but in the same. But it's true, isn't it, that she was very influenced by that form of Christianity?
I think that has been ramped up for the sake of the Netflix drama. I couldn't find much evidence that she was that enamoured of Billy Graham. He was invited to preach, but so have a lot of people been invited to preach before the Queen over the years. Then, of course, those preachers had to cope with forensic analysis of their sermons over lunch by the Duke of Edinburgh. The Queen didn't tend to go in for that kind of discussion. so I'm not convinced that Billy Graham was as big a figure in her life as was suggested. The big figures in her life spiritually have been deans of Windsor.
Stephen Bates.
Yes, I was going to add to what Catherine was saying. I think it's quite hard to see the Queen as getting up out of her seat and coming to the Lord. I think her faith was deep and intense and quite private. It was a very English and very Anglican form of religious belief. I'm sure of that. She was the Church of England was very central to her life. She was deeply conscious of being the supreme governor and all that, and she knew the church's politics and as well as its theology.
I mean, but her faith and her role as Queen very much bound up together. I was reading something on Twitter from Sally Hitchener, who's from St Martin in the Field this morning, and she was saying she almost had a superhuman ability to serve because she was motivated by something other than her own ego. She believed she was called to serve by God and that this was lifelong. I mean, the two are inextricably linked, aren't they, Catherine?
I think this is an absolutely crucial point. If you're the head of state and you just believe in your own PR, that's going to be deeply problematic. If you think that you are serving, for want of a better description, a higher power, I think that keeps you grounded. That means you have a certain humility, and that idea of service came to the fore very powerfully, I think, every year with the Maundy Thursday services, which commemorated Christ washing his disciples' feet. I mean, years ago, monarchs did do things like that, but that went out the door. But she would have this symbolic distribution of Maundy money to people. And the interesting thing about her was that with the Maundy Thursday services, she took them out to the country. Usually the Queen received other people, but she went out to people. She took those services around to different cathedrals, and I think that had an important symbolism. She was going out to them.
It's interesting. She takes it out, but she also brings things back to the centre. Because I was reading about the Commonwealth service, where they moved it at one point to the Guildhall rather than Westminster Abbey because of the role of other faiths, and she very much wanted it brought back into the Abbey. So they called it an observance rather than a service or something, so that they could include other faiths. But she wanted it at the centre of established religious life, even though. Yeah,
I think you've been reading my book, Rosie.
Oh, just maybe.
That it's a really important point, and about her interest in other faiths, and it was evident even back in the 1950s. At Christmas 1952, that was her first Christmas message, and although many of them until the year 2000 became sort of about more general good wishes, that one she talked about her forthcoming coronation in June 53, and she asked people of all faiths to pray for her. I think in 1952, to say people of all faiths to pray for her, it was quite a progressive moment and innovative. I suspect because she was queen of what were the last vestiges of empire and then became the Commonwealth, she came into contact with people of other faiths, perhaps earlier than most British people. And so when this became a more diverse nation with more people of other faiths, she was at ease with that in a way that perhaps some establishment figures weren't quite so at ease.
I know the Muslim Council of Great Britain said in their tweet last night she was the first British monarch to visit a mosque. Is that true? Must be true. They said it.
Yes, although
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
She probably was the first British monarch to visit a mosque, but Queen Victoria was actually very interested in...
That was when the first
religion.
mosque was built, wasn't it, under Victoria's reign?
She had a great interest in Islam and other religions. Yeah.
Stephen, I mean, in 2012 as well, marking her Diamond Jubilee year, she said about Anglicanism that it has a duty to protect the free practice of all other faiths in the country, which is really interesting, isn't it? And actually, Justin Welby on the Today programme this morning talked about Her Majesty seeing the Church of England as a kind of umbrella for faith, generally.
Yes, I think that's a very strong part of her appreciation that she was the queen of the entire country and all the people within it, and also, of course, had that sort of function for the Commonwealth, all the countries of varying sizes from India to the smallest Pacific islands. So, yes, that I am sure was a hugely motivating factor in this. And of course, we've now had Prince Charles, admittedly some time ago, talking about defender of faith as opposed to the faith. And I'm sure that's a reflection of how he's going to go as well. It would be absurd to exclude any serious faith group from the coronation.
I'm wondering whether the sort of increased visibility of faiths per se in this country over the last few years bears any relation to the fact that she's spoken more openly about faith, but she has also reigned during a period when church attendance and the observance of formal Christianity has just sort of collapsed, really. I just want to read to you, Catherine, what Ben Judah wrote. He's a writer and works with an American NGO, but I think he's based in London. And there were lots of Americans putting not very nice things on Twitter yesterday. And he said, Americans should be warned of the intense depth of feeling here. It's hard to explain, but millions feel that the Queen is their spiritual grandmother. It's not like a dying president, but the passing of the chief saint of a still felt British religion. I thought that was really nice.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. I was talking earlier, and you have also referred to the fact that while she became more explicit in what she had to say in public about her own faith, church attendance declined. But I think what that means is that for a lot of people at Christmas, the Queen was how they got their bit of religion on Christmas Day, through listening to her message either on the radio or watching on TV. So I think she did have an impact in that way. And I was very struck by somebody interviewed outside Windsor Castle last night, a member of the public. And he said she was a guiding light, and perceived her to be somebody who lived her life in such a way that the rest of us should look up to it. And certainly when it came to family matters, she had to deal with a lot of difficulties, and perhaps not so recently, but in years gone by, many of the family difficulties she dealt with were to do with divorce, remarriage, whether relatives of the monarch should be able to marry in church again, and the of course, I was about to say the Prince of Wales. I should say the King's second marriage was, still had question marks over it. And although the Church of England by then, in 2005, had said divorcees could remarry in church, they in fact on that occasion only permitted a blessing. So religion has played a part in her family issues as well, and she's had to deal with them in a particular way while the rest of us watched. Stephen,
did you want to say something about that?
No, I defer to Catherine on that.
Okay. But I just wanted to bring you in because, I mean, we've talked about the Queen's faith, but your book was about kind of royalty as a brand, really, a hugely successful brand, Royalty Inc. And and we've talked a bit about we're in a very much less deferential world than in 1952 when she became Queen. But actually, we talked a bit about her, people not believing their own publicity, and that's why she's been such a kind of solid rock through all that time. But her popularity has remained largely undimmed, despite the fact that as a world, as a society, we are so much less deferential than we used to be.
Yes, in a way, it's the monarchy's function to be unchanging or seemingly unchanging. Of course, the monarchy has changed hugely in the last 70 years in its attitudes and in the way it deals with just about everything, including the outside world. In 1952, the Queen wasn't going to be allowed to meet divorcees, and now, in the last few years, she had social media and all the rest of it. So it was explained to me once that the monarchy worked by the Marmite strategy, which was in comparison to the small yeast-based savoury product. It looks like something out of heritage, the little brown pot, the yellow label, the yellow top. It looks as if it hasn't changed since Queen Victoria was on the throne. In fact, not only has the recipe changed, but all the marketing and even the shape of the little bottle that it comes in. What happens is it changes, but no one notices because it's done so subtly and gradually. Yeah. And that's the monarchy's intention as well. Maybe they say Majesty to compare the Queen to a yeast extract, but that was exactly how they went about it, and it actually worked.
Yes, Stephen.
It wasn't out of touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Leo, can I just turn to you? You've been looking at the reactions of leaders across the faith groups.
Yeah, there's been so many tributes coming in from faith leaders across the UK and around the world, far too many to mention all of them. But to give you a flavour of the praise and the love and the gratitude being expressed by leaders of faith, you may have heard the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, saying the Queen's gift to engage with everyone whom she met and the ability to make them feel at ease was a remarkable skill and one which showed deep connection to the people she served and a desire to live out Jesus' teaching. Also, the Chief Rabbi, Ephraim Mervis, said that throughout her extraordinary reign, she conducted herself with grace, dignity, and humility and was a global role model for a distinguished leadership and selfless devotion to society. Zahra Mohammed from the Muslim Council of Britain said Her Majesty was the first monarch to engage with the newly established Muslim communities. And that point before, that they said that she was the first monarch to visit a UK mosque during her Jubilee celebrations in 2002. And then the Hindu Council UK, we are deeply saddened to hear of the passing of our beloved Queen. And finally, from Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who of course is head of the Catholic Church for England and Wales, the Queen's faith has been an inspiration. Our prayer, and this is lovely, our prayer is that she is now received into the merciful presence of God to be reunited with her beloved Prince Philip. This is the promise of our faith and our deep consolation. We pray for His Majesty the King as he assumes his new office. God save the King. From Cardinal Vincent Nichols. If you want to read all of the comments, we've put them all onto our website, which is religionmediacentre.org.uk. Oh, and Lord Singh, I should say, Lord Singh has just comments just come in of Wimbledon, representing Sikhs, saying her life was of selfless service to her subjects, an unparalleled service conducted with both dignity and humility.
Well, we can now talk to Rabbi Liss, Director of the Centre for Rabbinic Excellence and Rabbi of Highgate Synagogue. And we're delighted Qari Asim, MB's joined us as well, Senior Imam at Makkah Mosque in Leeds and Chair of the Mosques and Imams National Advisory Board. Thank you both for being there and thank you for being patient as well. But Rabbi Liss, first of all, I think you met the Queen a few years ago.
I did. I had the great privilege to be invited to a reception where Her Majesty wanted to thank members of the community, members of the faith community who have been involved in interfaith. Part of the discussion has reflected on the fact that she's not just defender of the faith, but defender of faith. And I think this is something she was passionate about. She was patron of a number of Jewish charities. She championed interfaith, and she also wanted to guarantee Holocaust memorial in this country, which was so meaningful to the Jewish community. It's also been mentioned that her humility, everyone talks about her humility and how she reflected the fact that she wasn't there about herself, but called to serve by God. And one of the, in Jewish practice, when we see a head of state, and there's a blessing to be said, which in Hebrew is Baruch shenosel mechvode lebosel adam, which is translated as blessed is he who has shared his glory with mortals of flesh and blood, really expressing the view that the role of a monarch is to, the role of royalty on earth is to reflect royalty in heaven. And I can't think of anyone who exemplified that better than Her Majesty the Queen. And when actually everyone was waiting in a line to go and see her, actually I didn't know I was going to be meeting the Queen, and I got in a lot of trouble with my mother. I was invited to Buckingham Palace, but the Queen it was 3 years ago. She was 93 at the time. And when we got there, we were told the Queen would be there, but I thought she would just come in and give a speech. And we were asked to line up to go into a room. And as I'm talking to somebody next to me, I look up, there's one person in front of me, and then there's Her Majesty the Queen. And so I quickly turned to one of the courtiers and I said, "What's the protocol?" And they said,
"Spot it up."
Yes, and they said, "There is no protocol." And I said, "The one thing I can assure you is that there is protocol, but we don't know what it is." Anyway, so I was brought in front of Her Majesty the Queen. My name was announced, and before I went over to her, I had the opportunity to say that blessing, which was a very moving moment for me. And then I said to Her Majesty the Queen, on behalf of this wonderful country and on behalf of the Jewish community, I want to thank you for everything you do. And she responded very kindly that, "Thank you for saying that. It's my duty and honor." And really but I felt there's something untangible, but I felt that I was in the presence of greatness. And that's not something I've felt too often when meeting people. Really, she had this aura about her.
Rabbi, that's a wonderful story. Thank you. Qari Asim, I noticed you posted on Twitter last night about the Queen's wisdom and unwavering strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, obviously, we offer our deep condolences to His Majesty King Charles III, members of the royal family, the nation and the Commonwealth. I think the passing of this much revered Queen marks the end of an era. And that era has been marked with dignity, humility, grace, resolute faith, and selfless dedication to public service. The Queen's reassuring presence in the nation's lives, in all of the community's lives, has been a source of hope, stability, and unity for us all. She enjoyed a dignified and warm relationship with the Muslim community in Britain, but also across the Commonwealth countries. The 6 of the Commonwealth countries comprise of a large Muslim population, and the others where there's a large Muslim community as a minority. So as a result, I think across the nation, mosques will be paying tribute to the Queen at Friday prayers today, expressing their gratitude for the gift given not only to all the communities in this country, but beyond, and also thanking God for the shining legacy that she has left for all of us, in particular those who are in positions of influence and as well as the faith leadership. I have long admired the Queen's deep respect for other people's beliefs and unwavering desire and interest in celebrating the commonalities and shared values between faith and beliefs. In 2004, the Queen remarked that in diversity is indeed a strength, not a threat. And during her long reign, rather than resisting this enormous change in the religious composition as well as ethnic composition in this country, the Queen actually embraced it and celebrated they celebrated diversity as well as friendship, between different communities, in particular faith communities. I have had the privilege of meeting the Queen on a number of occasions, and I'll echo what the Rabbi Liss has said, that in terms of, you are in awe of this huge, albeit short in terms of height, but in awe of this huge personality, but who was pleasant, had a gentle humor, also a remarkable capacity to listen, and you were left with this awe, but also at the same time inspiration that how one should service their communities, their congregations, their people. And I think that's something that will remain with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much, Qari Asim and Rabbi Liss. Rosie, you just wanted to add something.
Oh, well, it was just a little anecdote, which is about her humility. And we haven't mentioned her wit, but her humility. Though I was interviewing once Claire Short about the nature of the Privy Council. She was a former Labour MP in Birmingham. And she went to the Privy Council and she was just about to go up to the Queen and shake her hand when the mobile phone went off in her bag. And she fumbled around, she turned it off, she went to the Queen, she shook her hand, and the Queen just said, "I hope it wasn't somebody really important." It just says something about it, doesn't it? And if anyone heard the Today programme this morning, Frank Cottrell-Boyce was talking about, setting up the sort of Paddington, the Paddington scene, and again something about her humour really. Yeah.
Catherine mentioned Maunday services, and I said at the beginning I started as a local reporter. I remember coming to Ripon in 1985 to the cathedral, and just to see the joy on people's faces. And the other thing I thought, my mum and dad with me, they've now passed away, and the effect it had on them to see the Queen up close, to be with ordinary people. And out of the millions of photographs that you see across the world on front pages, I had a little cine camera, and I filmed the Queen passing in the car. And for me, despite all those amazing images around the world, my little cine film taken in 1985 at Ripon Cathedral is very precious to me.
Oh, you'll hang on to that. Thank you so much, everyone who's taken part today. Stephen Bates, Catherine Pepinster, your expertise and wisdom has been hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. It brings us to the end of this week's rather different Religion Media Centre podcast. Do please stay in touch with us via @RelMedCentre on Twitter. But from Leo, Rosie and myself, thanks for spending time with us in this momentous week. We'll be back next Friday. Bye for now.